Gregory Downes Howells was a 42-year-old from Mendocino, California. He loved to golf and was a playwright. On the evening of June 17, 1997, Greg went to the Rancho Canada golf course in Carmel Valley to play around. But he didn't come home that night. The next morning, Greg's cart and clubs were found on the 13th tee. He was never seen again. I'm Ed Denzel, and this is Unfound. All the world's a stage. Yes, you've heard it, but do you know where it comes from? Yes, Shakespeare, but what play? The play is As You Like It, the story of a woman who flees persecution by running away into a forest. On the other hand, in hearing that phrase, some of you may be thinking of this lyric from the band Rush. All the world's indeed a stage, and we are merely players, performers and portrayers, each another's audience outside the gilded cage. That comes from the song Limelight, which tells of the difficulty the band's drummer Neil Peart had with the publicity that they got once the band became famous. For me, I think both Shakespeare and Rush got it right. The world is indeed a stage, and we put on performances for each other, with us often being much different in public than we are in private. And certainly with 21st century social media, that is truer than ever. People trying to paint a perfect picture of their lives, while behind the scenes, things are the opposite. Well, in the disappearance of Gregory Howells, from all outward appearances, he had everything. A great marriage, a successful comedy show that he produced with his wife, with her being the star, and 2 beautiful children, including a newborn daughter. Then Greg was gone, and we're left to wonder if this was all just part of setting the stage. And now a summary of the case. This is brought to you by my friend Megan Good's website, charleyproject.org. Gregory Howells was an ambitious and funny guy. When he met his wife Sherry, Greg was going to law school, and she remembers the first joke he ever told her. The schooling didn't work out, but the relationship did, with he and Sherry going golfing on their first date. They then got married and became a successful team, producing an off-Broadway play that Sherry starred in and Greg directed. They also performed the play at numerous locations around the United States. In 1988, they had a daughter, with another following in 1996. However, despite the success, Greg began to slip into a depression the year of his disappearance. He started not taking care of himself, while also leaving for several hours at a time without Sherry knowing where he was. This culminated in Sherry requesting marriage counseling, but this ended up being staged by Greg, with a friend of his pretending to be a licensed family psychologist twice. Something Sherry didn't find out about until after Greg disappeared. So on June 17, 1997, Greg actually seemed to be in a positive mood. A play had been trying to sell had gotten attention from CAA, a huge talent agency in Los Angeles. Later that day, in the evening as usual, Greg went to the Rancho Canada public golf course to play before it got dark. He went alone, which was common for him. However, Greg didn't return that night. Sherry made efforts to figure out where he was, but due to having a newborn baby, her options were limited. The next morning, a groundskeeper found Greg's cart on the 13th tee, with some of his clubs lying on the ground. In addition, his car was in the parking lot. A search of the area by the club's employees yielded no clues as to what happened to Greg. He was never seen again. Greg's case certainly could be seen as a situation where he staged his own disappearance, whether to commit suicide or start a new life. However, in the last 23 years, there has been no proof of either outcome. Thus, questions remain. Number 1. Could Greg's gambling habit have gotten him in trouble with the wrong people? Number 2. Why would Greg disappear when he had to know that his life insurance, a concern he seemed to have in 1997, would only distribute funds to his family if there were proof of his death? And number 3. If Greg did commit suicide, why has his body never been found in the area surrounding the golf course, despite there being new construction over the last 23 years? Greg's wife, Sherry, is fairly convinced he staged his disappearance, although she is not sure to what end. The guest for this episode is Greg's wife, Sherry Glazer. Unfound News. This past Monday, June 15th, I was fortunate to do another show with Dr. Grace Telesco from Nova Southeastern University. Did you watch it? If not, you can go to either Unfound's YouTube channel or to the Fischler College of Education and School of Criminal Justice Facebook page to watch the hour-long interview. Next, another Unfound on the Ground also took place this past Monday. The topic was developing and maintaining sources. This is a program for premium Patreon members. If you'd like to be able to access this new series when it happens, please become a supporter at patreon.com/Unfound Podcast. Finally, today's disappearance is another in which I made a map and a video to help you better understand the locations. So please check out those at either YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, or the website, theunfoundpodcast.com, where you can find Unfound. Unfound supports accounts on Podomatic, iTunes, Stitcher, Instagram, Twitter, Spotify, Deezer, and Facebook. On Wednesday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern, please join us on the Unfound Podcast Channel on YouTube for the Unfound Live Show. All of you can talk with me, and I can answer your questions. I'm so happy to have on this episode of Unfound the wife of Gregory Howells, Sherry Glazer. Sherry, welcome to Unfound.
Thank you so much for having me, Ed.
You're very welcome. It's been, I guess we've known each other, for a couple months, Sherry, so it's finally nice to have you on the program, and I'm glad that we could arrange for this episode to come out right around the time of the anniversary of Greg's disappearance here in June. Let's start there. How did you and Greg meet?
Well, I was doing theater in San Diego. I was part of a women's comedy improv group called Hot Flashes. And he was a friend of one of my co-stars. And I didn't know him, but he came to our show. Mm-hmm. And he thought that I was very funny and talented, so he came backstage afterwards with his then wife, and he congratulated me and told me a funny joke that I could use for one of my characters. And it was a very simple and innocent joke. And you want to hear it?
Yeah, go, please. Absolutely. My listeners and I certainly want to hear it, for sure.
He said, "What's a dentist's favorite song?" And I said, "I don't know what." He said, "Fillings. Nothing more than fillings."
Oh, my. That's so bad. But good. I love those types of jokes, playing words like that. I love jokes like that. Okay.
That really was a lot of his character.
Uh-huh.
He had that really corny, funny humor.
Yeah.
So I thought he was funny, and I went on with my day.
Uh-huh.
And then it turned out that a little unit was available right next door to my house in the canyon in San Diego in Golden Hill, and he came to look at it. He came to rent it, and he did. he moved in and lived there, and we just started talking. As he passed by my house, and I'd be doing something odd like defrosting my freezer with a hammer.
We've all been there, yeah. Yeah.
And he found me entertaining, and I found him very kind. So we just started talking and spending time together, playing racquetball, sharing meals, and became friends.
So I guess somewhere in there he got divorced then, sometime after he came to your show or something?
Yeah. He got divorced by the time he moved in next to me.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
Okay, was that something, now that you look back at it now, was that a little bit of a coincidence that he moved in next door, or do you think that he had his eyes on you and that was part of the plan?
I don't think so. I mean, I had friends that lived next door that he was connected to. Mm-hmm. I think it just happened to work out that way. It was really, it was just a shack. It was hardly any. It wasn't really a place. It was more of a shed.
Well, down in San Diego, I know San Diego, and sheds can go for a lot of money in San Diego, depending on the location.
It was a great location. Location. So, no, I don't think there was any intention there other than, he liked my comedy, but he needed a place because of, I think, the divorce. He lost the home part of that. So he was in law school, and he just wanted to bury himself in his books and become a lawyer. That was his goal. So, he'd hide out in there and as long as he could. Okay. And then he'd come out and we'd play.
Now, you told me that your first date, and of course this is ironic given the information on his disappearance, but you told me the first date you had with him, you went golfing.
Yeah, as I said, we were kind of we played sports. We played tennis, we played racquetball, and one afternoon while we were playing racquetball, I smacked myself in the mouth with the racket, and he came over to me to see if I was okay, and I showed him where I hit myself, and he gave me a little kiss right there on my lip, and I had that experience of like seeing little hearts and birds, and I might love this guy because we were good friends. We had a great time, and it kind of just dawned on me. And then after that, he asked me out. He asked me, he said, let's go, do something fun. I'll surprise you. And so he took me to Torrey Pines Golf Course.
Wow, fancy.
Yeah. And I laughed. I just thought, this is never going to work out because I'm not into golf or golfers. But when he teed up that ball on the first green, I swear, I just was like,
swooning. You were swooning.
Swooning. He had a nice swing.
Okay.
I did. I was. And he liked to go out in the evening because he wasn't a real kind of social guy in that way. He didn't want to just golf with strangers. It was more romantic. It was absolutely gorgeous. And then he took me to dinner at the deli in Golden Hill, and then he took me to see Pee-wee's Big Adventure. That was our date.
Well, nothing says romance like Pee-wee Herman, Sherry.
So this was like 1986 or 85.
Yeah, it must have been, I'm thinking that's about right? Yeah, I think that's about right. Okay. So you two hit it off. You started dating, and how long was it? How long did you date before you got married? And I should ask, did he actually get his law degree? What went on while you were dating? Did he continue his education?
Well, I got pregnant, and the baby was coming just as finals were happening, and he lost track of it. So no, he didn't graduate. Okay. I think the only thing he got was a B in contracts. I remember him always telling me that. I got a being contract, so the least I can do that or whatever. And so we got pregnant, and he said he'd be there and he would marry me. So that's what we did. I was 6 months pregnant with our daughter Dana when we got married in La Jolla at the La Jolla Bridge and Shuffleboard Club, which is just a real simple place. Looks over, La Jolla Cove. It's $50 for Saturday night.
Okay.
Got my wedding dress right off the rack. It was very simple and lovely wedding.
Neat. And what year was that?
I guess that was 87.
87. Okay.
For a second, because Dana was born in December of 87, so yeah, it was August of 87.
Okay. And so you two get married then, and what are you doing? You said that when you met him, you were doing this show. What were you doing? What did he continue to do maybe throughout the 80s, being married to him? What did you two do?
Well, because he was such a big fan of mine, and he said that I should do my own show, do a one-woman show, which was very popular in the day. There was Lily Tomlin, there was Whoopi Goldberg, Sandra Bernhardt, and so he said that he would help me develop my shows. So we wrote the first show I did was called Coping, because I left the comedy group, and we wrote the Coping and put it on at a bookstore in San Diego. It was a hit. Everybody loved it. And so we decided to craft that to really, put it into a shape that would be more marketable. And it turned out that I was already doing 3 characters for my family. I played my father, I played my mother, and I played my grandmother. Those characters are very strong for me. So we decided to do a piece based on family and call it Family Secrets. And each character would have a secret and a story that went with it. Comedy and poignancy is really what so he was my director and co-writer, and he would shape the piece. And we ended up taking it all around California and getting rave reviews and a lot of attention until I was in Monterey. We were in Monterey visiting my parents, who was in Carmel Valley, and a guy named Harry Weiner came to the show. Harry Weiner was directed a movie called Space Camp.
I've heard of it. Yeah, I've heard of it. Yeah, I don't know if I saw it, but I heard of it. Yes.
And he said, "You got talent, lady. I'm going to bring you to Los Angeles." So he produced our show at the Tiffany Theater on Sunset Boulevard, and that's where I got an agent and a run in LA, and all things started to open up for us. So we moved to LA. We moved to Topanga so I could be in the biz. And we developed it for quite many, many years, because it took 7 years before we could get off Broadway. And we did, of course, come to Florida. We were in Fort Lauderdale. We were in Miami. We also went to Chicago and went to Austin and Minneapolis. You tour until it's ready for New York. And then we did. We took it to New York, and Family Secrets, written by Sherry Glazer and Greg Howells, directed by Greg Howells, ran for 15 months off Broadway, 94 to 95, and it is still the longest running one-woman show in off-Broadway history.
That's amazing. It's so good. Well, how would you explain the working relationship that you had with Greg? What were his strengths and what were your strengths?
My strength was and is the material. I have a way of harvesting material from my life. Like, I take all the pain and trauma and I turn it into comedy. And he has the eye. He has the director's eye and the structure. He would read, his favorite books were Shakespeare, Dickens, the Bible, and the sports page.
Okay.
That was his reading material. That was what was in the bathroom library. And so language was his forte. And he just really got we were just very well balanced in terms of how we completed each other in that way. Like, he needed me and I needed him, and it was success.
Okay. And how would you say, being that the business was going well, of course, making it the whole way to off-Broadway, how was your marriage going through these times? This was, of course, been late 80s into mid-90s, and how was your marriage going? And I think that you have another daughter, too, right, besides Dana?
Yeah.
Correct?
My other daughter came in 96, after New York.
Okay.
You know, he was a tricky guy. Like, during those years, you know, he had a lot of secrets. It's so funny, we were doing Family Secrets, but I didn't know his. And he would go off, and I'd be like, where's Greg? I remember saying that a lot in my marriage. Where's Greg? Where's Greg? Where's your dad? Where did Dad go? Still saying it to this day. And he liked to drink, and that was very difficult. And the betting, he was a gambler too, and so that was a real contentious thing between us, because he had a bookie named Jimmy Scatella that made me nervous.
Yeah.
And so, we had our ups and downs, but he was a great dad. He was a really sweet husband in terms of love and affection. I really liked that. And he's just so smart and entertaining and his best storyteller ever. He made me laugh.
From
Even
that first
joke
he told you, right? Feelings, nothing more than feelings, from the first time you met him.
Nothing more than feelings. So laughter really kept me, busy, and my theater career, and my children, or my daughter. And I lived off the grid at this point. We were living up in Comshie, in Mendocino County, very tiny town. We had a generator, and we had solar panels and a compost toilet. We were living real.
Wow.
We were kind of off the landers, back to the landers. And so I knew, like, after New York, he wasn't acting right. This was 95 into 96. He was depressed. And I don't know what he was up to. He didn't, like, bask in the success that we just had. And I was writing a new show called Oh My Goddess after the birth of our daughter Lucy, when I realized that God had to be a woman too, or at least there's a goddess. You can't have a father without a mother, kind of thing. And so we were writing this new piece, and he just wasn't. It wasn't him. It's like the run in New York kind of depressed him. And when I was pregnant with Lucy, he went off and directed Family Secrets with two other actresses, one in Florida and one in Chicago. He was off, actually being creative, and I thought successful. He also had been writing a play called Lazarus, which is hilariously funny, about Lazarus and Jesus. He was sending that out, and he was getting all kinds of rejections. So I think that was like the turning point. Like right after New York, something happened to him. What? I don't know. But he definitely, his energy was like, yeah, something's off. And then my dad died, and he and Greg were very close in a lot of ways, and I think that really got him too.
Yeah, you told me about that. Yeah, you told me about that. That he and your father were very close. You told me that in a previous conversation, right?
Yeah, they had a funny relationship. They played basketball together and tennis, and my dad wanted more out of him as far as like being a good husband. My dad was not comfortable with the gambling, but Greg had a lot of respect for my dad. Sat by his deathbed wearing a tie and a jacket, and really showing my dad a lot of love and respect. My dad died at the end of January '97, and after that, Greg he put on a ton of weight. He just started eating dessert. I don't remember eating much dinner after that. Drinking a lot, and just being very absent. Like I just didn't know what he was up to.
So he was leaving,
I had a little baby, and so I was performing Oh My Goddess. We had just opened it in Carmel, so I was staying at my mom's house with Greg, and she was a new widow, and we had the baby, and we were putting up this new show in order to go back to New York. But Greg was very elusive. He was fading out. The beard, the extra weight, the drinking, and the mystery. But I'm performing 5-6 times a week. I just had a baby. I'm trying to go, have a career,
right,
do what we're supposed to do, and what he was doing, something else.
So when you say he was absent, do you mean he would leave the house and be gone for hours at a time, and you wouldn't know where he was? Both physically and mentally absent.
Yeah.
Okay. I have to ask, even when you said this, maybe you started in New York as well after your show played there. Did you ever suspect that maybe there was another woman or something like that? Or you said gambling. Of course, we have Atlantic City there. That was going on. What were you thinking where he was going?
He was more of I don't think it was another woman. I think he was more of a night prowler, especially in New York City. He'd just go out and walk. And
okay.
I think he drew a lot of inspiration. Like when we played in San Francisco and he was doing the same kind of night prowl, he was writing a children's story about the gargoyles on the buildings coming to life. And he wrote a whole children's story about that. He was a really great writer. And so in his absences, I think he was just in his own mind somewhere.
Okay.
He really he had this longing to be published and to be recognized. But he didn't realize that he was recognized because we did this together.
Right.
He wanted his own recognition. That was paramount to him.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah. I have to ask this. Do you think that there might have been some jealousy going on there? You're getting the attention, and you're the performer, you're on stage, etc., and he was kind of longing for that as well?
No. He liked the shadow. Okay. It wasn't that. He didn't want to be in the spotlight.
Okay.
It was more of his work being in the spotlight. And I don't think he was jealous, but I think his family, his mother particularly, thought I was emasculating to him because I made the money. And he, was home with the kids and writing and do all kinds of stuff. He didn't have a quote-unquote job other than directing and, all that.
Yeah.
So I think they made him feel like he wasn't enough. And that he came along with that. That was his history of not. He was the second son. There were 6 kids in his family. First there was George, his older brother, and then him, and then a girl. So he had no special place at the table. He was the black sheep.
Did you ever?
So he brought that along with him. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Did you ever talk to when you were seeing this? Did you ever talk to anybody in his family about what you were seeing? How he seemed to be on this downward slide?
Oh no, they wouldn't. They didn't talk about stuff like that.
Mm.
He had a sister who was had been in a halfway house for 20 years because of mental breakdown, and nobody talked about her really at all. So no, they were from Massillon, Ohio, Sandusky, Ohio. Mm-hmm. They were from Sandusky, Ohio, and it was just very.
I've been there. I've been to both those places. Yes, I know them. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm a New Yorker. I'm passionate. I'm Jewish. I'm loud. I'm theatrical, and we were very, buttoned up and proper, and like I remember a lot of the conversations were, when you go to the park, you have to go up on the freeway, and then you get off at that first exit. Oh, is it the first exit or the second? And then you can go back around, on the main street. Like, what is this? So there wasn't a lot of, heart to heart. Even after he disappeared, it was hard to get them to converse with me. Yeah. I thought that would open the door.
Right. Did you ever recommend to him, and of course this is one of the stories that he, something that seems very underhanded to me that we should talk about, but I was going to ask you if you ever got any counseling, and in fact, you thought he did get counseling, and then you found out that it was a put-on. Maybe you need to explain that.
Okay, yeah, well, I think it was in April. It was either March or April of '97. He went on a walk with Lucy and his backpack, and while he was out with her, I was cleaning out the little Honda, and in the back seat of the passenger side, in that little sleeve in the back of the the chair, the seat, I found a gun, a little .22. And that was wrong for so many reasons, but especially because it was the backseat where children are. And secondly, I didn't know we had a gun, and I'd never seen a gun. And so I picked it up like I was picking up a dirty diaper, and then I buried it under the house. And I was so scared. It had been so moody. So when he got back with the baby and put her down, I said, I think we're going to have salmon for dinner, and I'm going to probably do some rice with that, and why do you have a gun? And then he got very angry and said things that the FCC wouldn't approve of. But we're not on the FCC. We're not on the radio.
We like to keep it PG, though, but I think we get the idea. Yeah.
It was ugly. It was very ugly and very menacing, and I said, I'm not telling you where it is. He said, tell me, or I'll kill you. I said, is that what the gun is for? And he said, it's my right to have a gun. And what if there's a mountain lion? And I'm like, okay, well, you're scaring me, and I'm not giving you the gun until we have therapy. Because you have to disclose to everybody that lives on this property. There were 2 other families that you have a gun, and I want to see the lockbox. I made all kinds of conditions to not interfere with his Second Amendment rights.
Okay.
So he agreed to therapy, and he said he didn't want a woman because he was sick of women telling him what to do and asking him how he felt. And so, fine, you find a therapist, and that's fine, whatever you want. So he found a therapist who, by some miracle, was willing to come to our house up a long dirt road, a 20-minute dirt road. Really, I should have known there was something awry. Okay. But I had just had a baby and I had a lot of things going on, and I was getting ready to open my show in June in Carmel, so I agreed. So this guy named Richard, he came up and he asked what we wanted to talk about, and I said the gun, and alcohol. Those are my two problems, my majors with him. And Richard listened, and he nodded his head, and he said, Sherry's got a lot of good points here. I think you really need to honor her. He said all the right things that just, really made me so happy. And he advised Greg to really think about whether he was an alcoholic, blah, blah, blah. And so at the end of the session, because he had come so far, I offered to make him dinner. And he said, sure. And Greg said, would you like a beer? And he said, sure. And they both cracked over the beer.
Okay.
And sure enough, I was young, okay? I was young. And I just kind of let it go because I had gotten that little biscuit. They threw me a biscuit.
Yeah.
He would disclose to the community he had a gun. He would, he was agreeing with me. So anyway, this guy came up one more time, and we talked a little bit more about my feelings. But
Okay.
turns out this guy was just a bar buddy. And Greg paid him to come up and pretend to be a therapist.
When did you find this out?
I didn't find this out till after Greg disappeared because I was searching, I was like, who was that? I got to call that therapist and see if there was any clue as to, did he say anything? Because I was trying to track him down,
Yeah.
And Richard was like, yeah, but I'm not. I have to tell you, we should meet in town. And I'm like, what is? So I thought he had info.
Yeah.
And I met him in town, and he just wanted to be in public because I probably would have punched him in the nose.
Yeah.
And he told me that this was all just made up.
Oh my gosh.
So the plot kept thickening.
Yeah. So you thought that once again this happened in what you estimate to be April of '97. So just a couple months before he disappeared. You want to have a serious sit down with a counselor. Greg arranges it, but he gets one of his buddies to pretend to be a counselor and show up at your house twice.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
And then,
Please.
And then he tells me that he really wants to detox from alcohol. So he's going to go to Carbon Hot Springs, which is a beautiful retreat center. It's about 3 hours from our house east. And I said, this is late April. And I'm like, I just had the baby. I'm getting ready for the show. Oh, fine. You need a break. So he left. So, and he would call me, every other day, and I'd ask him how his detox was going, and he'd say, I'm turning orange from all the carrot juice. It's really rough, but I just want to be a better man for you. Saying all these really sweet romantic things and healing things and getting me all hopeful. And then he comes back, and he's got a present for me. He gave me a Rolex.
Wow.
I'm like, what? Weren't you in Harbin? This is like in the high desert. There's nothing.
Yeah.
It's in Middletown. And he had a bag with some fudge for the kids, and it said La Mirage on the bag. So where was he? He was in Vegas. He went to Vegas.
He didn't go to that detox center or wherever it was. He went to Vegas and was gambling.
Yeah.
And how long would you say he was gone?
Rolex.
How long would you say he was gone?
He was gone 10 days. Because that was how long the detox program.
Oh my gosh. Wow. He does. I mean, these are of course are not funny things. They're very serious. That of course no person should do and everything. But he does. He sounds like a character, Sherry, to do these things.
Well,
to pull these things off.
There is humor. I'm sorry. It's 23 years later. I have to laugh. I mean, I'm not going to spend my life being miserable and tragically scarred from this. Although I have the scars, but now it's the story.
Yeah.
And And I said to him when he gave me the Rolex, I mean, we're really in the country, like I said, like solar panels and compost toilet. I said, what am I going to do with a Rolex here in the woods? And he said, Sherry, time is the most precious gift.
Wow, he really knew how to lay it on thick, Sherry.
I'm telling you. And I said, what am I going to do with you? Because I was so mad, and I was just, why didn't you just bring the rent money, right, instead of a Rolex? And I said, what am I going to do with you? He said, just love me, Sherry. Just love me. I said, okay. Mm-hmm. And then I guess he wrote his will, because his will is dated April 17th. And I didn't see that, but as we were leaving Comshi to get in the car with the baby to go to Carmel to do the show, he said, my will and my insurance policy are in the drawer in the desk. I'm like, okay, great. Let's go. Get in the car. So he told me. Yeah.
Okay. So he was doing these things. He pulled off the counselor scheme. He said he was going to detox, but he actually went to Vegas. And he supposedly could have come back and just pretended like he really did go to detox, but he owned it up to you. I guess he owned up where he was. And then, but then he has this will that I'm guessing maybe for you came out of nowhere. That statement maybe came out of nowhere. Had you two ever talked about that before?
No, we haven't talked about that before. It was out of nowhere. I did not understand it. I knew he was paying life insurance. I was like, why are you doing that? You're like 35. Why do you? He said, because it's a responsible thing to do because I have a family. He always had one of those lawful be in contracts answers for me.
Yeah.
So I just accepted it. I wish I had been more suspicious. I wish I have a naive kind of soul. I trust. And I trusted, even though he was just so untrustworthy, I trusted him anyway. And now I've learned my lesson, but yeah.
Did he ever talk in these months? Let's just maybe from the beginning of '97 until he disappeared. Did he ever bring up suicide? Did that ever cross your mind that he might be capable of it, or did he ever bring it up? Anything like that?
He was depressed, but he didn't really talk about suicide.
Okay. Because I think, of course, with all the disappearances we've covered on Unfound, I think we have covered some disappearances where it's, a possibility that the person, man or woman, did commit suicide, went off and did something, maybe with a gun, maybe jumped off a bridge. I think that those are always possibilities. But, you do portray a guy who was lying to his wife, at least on a couple very big topics, and then talks about life, a will and everything. I think he's depressed. That's why I have to ask if suicide talk ever came up.
There was something about the life insurance policy that it had to be in effect for at least 5 years if there were any suspicious circumstances.
Okay.
So I'm wondering if he was like way planning, And he did say to me, I can't remember when it was. I think it was after Lucy was born, so maybe 96. He said, if it gets to a certain point, I could just disappear. He said, if it gets to a certain point, I could just disappear. He did say that. And I thought he was saying if it gets awful and crappy and, bad. I thought that's what it meant. But I think he was saying it was great. I was in a great position. We'd had the success of Family Secrets. I had the baby. I was with my mom. I had this new show. and I think he saw himself as an obstacle in my world, and that he wasn't good for the kids. He was a really good brother. He was he was a play. He liked to play with the kids, but when it came to taking responsibility for them, being an adult, that was hard for him.
Difficult.
Like any kind of pain, if the kids fell or they were hurting or needed to go to the hospital, he could not stand. He couldn't handle it, and I think he was afraid of what was ahead. Because things happen to kids.
Sure.
So I think he was just so scared, and again, it's all conjecture. But I remember his discomfort, even though we had such great success. Like, here we are, 2 children, great successful Broadway show, great house in the country, a future. You had it. And then he just left. And then we did it.
Let me bring up one more incident that happened, and then we will talk about, we'll go to June 17th, 1997. You told me a story about you came home and your TV was out in the yard or something, and had he shot it, or when did this happen? This is something else that you told me.
Yeah, I was very frugal, and I would always look for the sale thing, and so I ended up getting a cheap TV, and the sound wasn't very good, and instead of returning it, he put it out on the deck, and the kids sat by while he shot the TV into the front yard.
With that .22 gun that you found in the car?
I don't know. I guess.
Okay.
But I didn't know he had shot it because I think that was before I knew about the gun. He just told me it fell off the deck, like it was like you're playing or some kind of. Yeah. But later on, my daughter told me that he shot it. I also found out later on that he had been shooting these old broke down cars, in the back 40, and he shot a car and the bullet ricocheted and hit him right in the groin. Oh, so, yeah, he shouldn't have had a gun. But I never saw the gun after the day that I unburied it. I gave it back because we had therapy.
Right. The
and I never saw it again.
Okay. Well, at least I guess what you're saying is at least he didn't bring that gun around the kids anymore. At least from what that was, which was the main point anyway.
Yeah.
Okay.
Very, very dangerous thing to leave a gun in the car.
I totally agree. So let's move up to June 17th, 1997, and just maybe fill the listeners in on how you remember that day. Of course, it's 23 years ago. We're doing this interview on June 8th, 2020, so almost exactly 23 years ago. But how do you remember that day and what went on? You saw Greg. What did he say, etc.?
Well, we had just opened the show. We've been running a couple of weeks, and we got a review that was very good, so he was excited. And this was our day off. It was a Tuesday, and we woke up, and he told me that he had spoken to our agent at CAA in Los Angeles, and they loved his play Lazarus. They were ready to produce Lazarus. Wow. And I remember being just thrilled because not only for his success, but it's a great play. It's so good.
Yeah.
And I kissed him, and I said, "You're a genius." And he said, I'm going to go golfing and celebrate. I said, "Yeah, I'm going to go to the farmer's market with the baby and my cousin Linda, who had a baby, and I'll see you later." Okay. And he helped me get in the car, load up the van, and he turned around. We were at my mom's house, so he turned around and walked into the garage, looked at me, and hit the button for the electric garage. And I went off to the market, hung out with my cousin, came back, and it was, summer, so made a little dinner and played with the baby and hung out with my mom. Didn't hear from him, but that wasn't, like I said, it wasn't unusual. But by dark, I was wondering, because he was supposed to go pick up our other daughter, Dana, the next day. She was coming down from Mendocino County to Carmel. And I was thinking, what is he doing? Where's he at? So it wasn't cell phones in those days.
Mm-hmm.
So I just kind of waited. And then by 11:30, I was worried.
Right. Of course.
So I called the cops, I called the hospital, how you do. And they hadn't seen or heard nothing. So I thought maybe he just took the car and went to get Dana, so he wouldn't have to drive in the day. So I thought, what could I do? I tried to sleep. And then around 7:30, I woke up and I called Dana up in Comshy, and I said, did Daddy get there? And she said, no. And then I was like, oh no, something's wrong. Something's off here. So I called the golf course, and I said, have you seen Greg Howells? I think he was out golfing last night. And they said, well, yeah, he did. He did sign in, and he took a cart out. I think it was like 6:30 or 7. And in fact, they said his car is still in the parking lot. And I thought, oh, that's bad. And that's when I called the sheriff.
Let me ask you, if I may jump in for a second, just maybe to make sure the listeners understand a few things. Would you say, you said this happened on the day off, which was this Tuesday. Would you say that this was unusual for Greg to go out golfing at that time? And, of course, we know the golf course is Rancho Canada, which is not open anymore. But was it unusual for him to go to that course, or was that all very standard for what was going on at the time?
Yeah, that was the most accessible public course, especially if he went on after hours, because he didn't like to pay. Mm-hmm. So he just walked on in the evening. He loved to golf in the evening, and so that was his way. He didn't like to be in a foursome. He just he was antisocial in that way. Okay. So this was not unusual at all.
Mm-hmm. And how far, if just to maybe give it a little idea once again for most people who have not been there, how far is it from where you were at your mother's at the time? Mm-hmm. And how far is it from there to the golf course?
My mother lived in Carmel Valley. She lived about 6 miles down Carmel Valley Road, and Rancho Canada was about, I would say, a mile down, so it's about 5 miles away.
Not far at all. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right, thank you.
There.
All right, thank you. So you wake up that next morning, he's still not home. You call Rancho Canada. Somebody there says, yeah, his car is still there. And so that's when I guess maybe you called the police again. You had said you'd already called them once, but you called them and told them that his car was there. And if you could just take the listeners from there, what happened next?
Well, the sheriff met me at the golf course, and we checked in, and they told us that Greg's golf cart was still out there, and it was, in fact, on the 13th hole. Mm-hmm. And we should go check it out. So me and I think it was a deputy sheriff, got in the golf cart and rode out to the 13th hole, and there was his cart and his golf bag and the clubs. There were at least four clubs out, and they were dropped, pointing in different directions, it looked like, to me. And the cop looked at the bag, checked the bag, and said, uh-oh. I'm like, what? And he said, there's no balls in the bag, which I didn't know what that meant, but he explained to me that golfers always have ball bags.
Of course.
So felt like he just stood there and hit them all. Whack. And dropped it. And there were no footprints or any kind of evidence of where he might have gone because, the sprinklers come on at 5 a.m.
Yeah.
And so that's when I started to panic. Like, it was terrifying. Like, and the car, Honda being in the parking lot still, with his play, Lazarus, right on the dashboard, and one golf ball, the Flying Lady ball, and a trunk full of beer cans, and his shoes, and his wallet in the back seat. And that was it. And then I knew there was some foul play. I don't know if it was done to him or he did. And I kind of went into shock. And then the sheriff I couldn't drive, so he drove me back to my mom's where he kind of interrogated me, questioned me.
Sure.
Because I was kind
pretty
of a
standard,
suspect.
yeah.
So I just gave him as much information. And they also needed info to put out the All Points Bulletin to find him.
Yeah, of course.
So
if I can ask, while you were there, did the deputy or sheriff, whoever was with you, and you're on the scene there's the cart, did they ever say, well, it looks like he got attacked, or or did they say, this kind of looks staged? Did they make any comments like that while you were standing there, seeing it for the first time?
No, I think he was kind of the nicest cop I ever met. He was just concerned about me, really. He was like, it was so odd. I mean, it really was kind of, it was otherworld. It just, there was a staged quality to it because of the cart and the golf bag and the clubs. So I think we were both just like, this is very strange. Neither of us, no one could come to a conclusion. There wasn't a blood or wasn't clothing anywhere. It was clean. It was beautiful. It was perfectly manicured green. It was green. And so, no, it was just solid mystery. Almost like he was like sucked up by a spaceship or down in the hole like Space Jam. That's
a feeling that many of my guests have expressed. It does seem sometimes like there are aliens and they are beaming people up. I mean, for sure. So I don't know that feeling. I've never experienced a disappearance personally, but what you're expressing there is very common, and so I totally understand that. And I want the listeners to know that on accompanying this interview with Sherry, I will be doing a video, a little description of the grounds, because I did get to speak to a man who worked at the golf course at the time of Greg's disappearance, and he was actually on the scene as an employee there that morning, and in fact, he was one of the first people to see the card, and I will be talking about my discussion with him. I was able to track him down and talk to him, and Sherry already knows what he had to say, but for all of you, I will be detailing my conversation with him after this interview. In addition, I'll be doing a video that will be posted on YouTube as well to explain some of these locations. Okay, so you're driven home. Are you thinking at that time, well, he'll be back in a few days, or did this feel like something different? Obviously, you've said that he used to go off for hours at a time. This just kind of felt a little different to you?
Yeah, well, whenever he went off, he had the car and his wallet and his shoes.
Yeah.
Right. And he was supposed to pick up our other daughter, Dana, as I said. So that wasn't like him to leave her hanging. That was not his character.
Okay.
And so my mom had to go get my daughter, because I was with the baby and in shock. And so what I did, as I set up a chair out on my mom's deck, and I sat with binoculars, looking over the forest in Carmel Valley. You can see the Ventana National Forest, which is where I thought he walked to. That would be if he walked south.
South, sure.
South. If he had gone south from the golf course, he would have walked into the forest. So I was looking for a light. I was looking for a campfire. I sat out there for days. So my mom's like, really, you can't do this. You have to think about your baby and your daughter and your show. You need to cancel your show or do something.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh yeah, I'm alive. So at this point, they were looking for him with the helicopters, infrared into the forest, and there was an all points bulletin, and there was pictures of him up to be on the lookout, kind of thing. So I just had to get myself together and cancel my show and get my kids, to calm without being able to explain to them. Well, Lucy was only 1, but Dana, she was 9, so that was the hardest part.
Yeah. I should ask about these searches. Just to be clear, they did do searches. In fact, the guy that I'll be detailing what he told me after this interview, even he and one of the other people working there kind of looked around. They said they did not see any signs of footprints or anything. A more complete search by the police and whoever else, did it reveal anything at all? Any signs of Greg other than his cart and the car and the clubs there? Anything?
Nothing.
Nothing.
There's not even a tiny shred of nothing. There was zero. There was less than nothing.
Okay.
There was just more confusion, especially with the other stories surrounding it. When I talked about, Las Vegas, and
right.
they're like, because they were asking me, and I'm an open book, so I just told them everything I could think of.
Yeah.
And so I think after about 3 weeks or months, I had to go home. I had to go back to Comchi with the kids. So I thought maybe there'd be a clue. So I took my kids and I went home, and that's when I found the will and the insurance policy. And I tried to get some help, but you don't get the insurance till 5 years later. So that was not a help at the time. And then I just waited and searched and hired a detective and did all the things that one could do.
Yeah.
And waited and waited and waited and waited. That was what my life was, waiting for that phone to ring. And if it rang and there was nobody on the other side, I was like him, just waiting and waiting and then waiting.
And still nothing.
That's
nothing.
0, and a lot more nothing.
Okay. Let me move on to some of these things. So they do a search for him. They can't find anything regarding him. It seems that he went there to golf, got to the 13th tee, and something happened, and he was never seen again. Leads it up, to a lot of different interpretations as to what could have happened. How did his family react to this? I'm guessing, even though it doesn't sound like you two maybe had a close relationship with them, but somebody had to call and tell them, right? And how did they react?
Yeah, I called his mom, not the first day, the day after, because I thought, if he shows up in 48 hours, that I'm not going to worry them. But she flew out, and she was very, very cold and very suspicious of me. And I remember it was a really hot day. It was the 21st of June, and I remember my mom offering her fruit and some water, and she refused. She wouldn't touch or eat anything in the house. And I gave her a copy of my memoir and said, you should read about your son because you don't really know him that well, and there's some stories about him in this book. You should have it, and I need help. I need help with your grandchildren. I need help finding him. And she was just very, seemed almost, she was angry. And then she went to a motel, and next day she went home, and she never talked to me again. And her husband, Greg's father, he really was stunned by it. Like, he actually called me, and he kind of liked me because he had been in the theater. And it hit him so hard that Greg had disappeared that he ended up having, his father had a stroke and died pretty soon after that. And then his family, they would send my kids a Christmas card, and they also put money away for my children in trust. And that's all, the only relationship that we've had. The kids tried. I tried to get them to be interested in their nieces and their grandchildren and send, but the couple of times that my kids went to their family, they felt so lonely and abused and confused. They just didn't want to ever go back. And then,
Okay.
Yeah, they just were cold and as they'd always been, and a little. I mean, his brother came out to ask me questions, and I think his other brother came out at one point, and we had a kind of a memorial where we talked about him and shared stories. And it was very difficult for us, folks who have deal with disappearing people, is you don't get to grieve, and grief is a gift. Grief, it's such an important part of life. And when someone dies, and yes, it's very sad, but once you see the coffin go in the ground and you throw the dirt and you have your knees buckle. That's what happens with grief. You have it's overwhelming. And with instances like this, when people disappear, you never get that. You can memorialize and you can do all kinds of stuff to try and kill that hope. And you can't. I can't. I am not able to say I will never ever see him again, because I hope I do. I have hope in my heart that I will see this guy, or at least find out what happened to him. And I would like, once I get that confirmation, then I can really grieve instead of like this kind of, it's sorrow and it's tragic, but it's not finished.
That's a very common feeling. I don't know if over the last 23 years you've had a chance to network with any other families who've lost loved ones, whether it's be a spouse or children, or maybe even children losing parents. But what you're expressing there is very common. That's kind of a purgatory type of situation. You're stuck in the middle somewhere. Yeah. Did you, as far as you know, since he disappeared and it seemed something happened, any reported sightings of him at all that were believable at all? Somebody, for example, who looked like Greg walking down the road from the golf course that night, anything like that at all?
No sightings.
None. Okay. Now, we have to remember, going back to what you said about a conversation you had with him that morning, is he said he had gotten financing for this play that he had written, Lazarus. You had said that he had gotten many rejections in the preceding couple years, maybe had gotten to him mentally, but then he told you that morning that CAA, which is a huge talent agency, in the world, was interested in it. But then what did you find out about that? And when did you find that out?
I think it was like a day later. I was just sitting, trying to put the story together, connect the dots, and I called CAA to see what the plan was. Like, who's producing, what's happening? And they said, no, we never said that. That's not true. No, that's not happening. And I thought, he told me that because he wanted me to feel good.
Yeah.
And he wanted to leave on a really good note. And in fact, we had booked a reading of Lazarus at the HBO workshop in Los Angeles, and that was for July something, maybe 18th, I want to say, but maybe that's just in my head. It was sometime in July we had booked this workshop, and I thought and I hoped in my heart that this was a publicity stunt, back from the dead, like Lazarus.
Yeah.
And I thought that I had all my eggs in that basket, that I would show up to this reading and he would appear and say, get all the press, like that. I don't know.
Right. I can see why you think that. Yeah.
And but unfortunately, it didn't happen.
Did that reading happen though? Did it happen?
Yep, it did. I went down and directed it, and there was a lot of press, and there was, but they were so focused on his disappearance that the play didn't get any attention.
Right. So you found out that the story that he told you about the financing was not true. That's okay. All right. And it should be known that just to put it on the record, that play has never been produced in the last 23 years. It is as it was back in 1997. Still just on paper.
Still just on paper. Happy to produce it. There's a theater. If we ever have theater again, yeah.
Okay.
Good
point.
It's a good play. It's a wonderful comedy.
Okay.
Of biblical proportion.
Now, you had mentioned the gun. We have to maybe to remind the listeners again. You had found this gun that was in the car. You were very worried about that because it was so near to your near your children. You went and buried it, and then you got it back out. Have you ever seen that gun again since the day he disappeared?
No, I never saw it again. I think he took it with him. I'm pretty sure he did.
Okay.
Because I would have found it in all the, moving and boxing my life up, and when I moved out of Comshy.
Right. And we also have to mention that I'm sure when the police got there and looked through his bag, if the gun would have been in his bag, they would have found it. But, of course, it was not there. So he's missing. You said his wallet is in the car, but this gun is missing as well. And I have to agree with you that, the times that you've moved, maybe since 1997, you surely would have run across it somewhere. So, you think it's just missing because you just haven't seen it, and you think it went missing with him the day that he disappeared. That makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Of course, you talked about his gambling, and just to put it bluntly, lying to you about going to a detox center. Instead, he went to Vegas for 10 days. He's into gambling. Any possibility that he might have owed somebody something, and they were trying to track him down, and they tracked him to that golf course that evening. Anything ever come out? You ever think about that? Anything that could lend credence to that?
He was a long-time gambler, because he was gambling when we met, and we were married 10 years too, so it was a long-standing relationship with his bookie, and it's very possible that he owed money, but he came back with the Rolex and so that was confusing, unless he made a little bit of money, he made enough to bring this ridiculous gift, but he didn't make maybe he owed 40 grand or 50 grand and he made 10. You know what I mean? And he just decided to get me this present.
Right.
And maybe that That's possible, but I wouldn't know because it was all, underground. It was like that stuff you don't know about.
Right.
They make people disappear all the time. At least as far as the movies go.
Right.
So, and as I said, there was another guy who disappeared. Gary Downes disappeared not soon after that, and he supposedly golfed at Rancho Canada, and there's some kind of a CIA connection there, and I thought maybe he went underground with the CIA, like changed his identity and all that stuff. I tried to kind of...
Yeah, I think we talked about that before. I think Gary Downes was actually found sometime. It's been a while. I will look that up, and I will include that in the information for this episode. But yeah, I think that he was eventually found. But yes, he was missing.
He was dead, yeah.
Yeah. But I guess what I'm also saying is after Greg disappeared, there was nobody who called you or came to one of your shows when you started performing again, or to your house and knocking on the door and saying, hey, Greg owed us money. Nothing like that happened.
Oh, no.
Okay.
No.
All right. Being that Greg, of course, and then at some point in here, you've already explained you found out that he had lied to you about the counseling session. So that happened after the disappearance. We also have to remember as well. Anything, though, that you found out about him, being that he would kind of go off for some hours or whatever else, anything after he disappeared that you found out about him that you can say, I'm not here to get into deep personal stuff, but anything related to the disappearance? Anything that you found out about him afterwards that you didn't know about him that could have led to his disappearance? Once again, maybe going one of these times you're moving and you find things of his. Anything like that at all that might have, led you in a direction? Anything like that?
There was some people who told me things about him, that he wasn't really in law school, that he had this whole secret life going on, and I just don't know. I mean, maybe not. They're just telling me stories, and they weren't nice stories, or they didn't resonate with me. But like I said, I was naive and innocent, and I believed in him. I thought he was one of the best writers and directors, and so maybe he was just the whole time just fake. Maybe he had this whole other life. Maybe he had a whole other family. Maybe he had another woman or another man. Some of my friends thought he might have been gay. There's all kinds of
All I'm asking,
theories.
all I'm asking for is any evidence of that. I realize in all the disappearances that we covered, people just talking. I'm just asking anything that you going through your attic or something. It was like, boy, I've never seen this before. Anything like that of Greg?
No.
Okay.
He orchestrated. I believe he orchestrated this, executed it perfectly without a trace.
Okay.
There's nothing that I can say, oh, this may be.
You've told me more this one, and the listeners know by this time, I usually talk to guests a few times before they appear on the program, but you said to me a few times that he would be the type of guy to stage something like this.
Yeah, he was a very theatrical character. He loved theater. He loved Shakespeare. He loved Dickens. Dickens is very dark and it's very theatrical, and he loved theater. He loved it. I mean, he was in law school, but he was glad to drop out and become my director and be in the theater all the time. I mean, he held the baby and ran the lights while I was on stage. And he wrote a screenplay and children's stories, and this Lazarus play, and he loved theater. He loved a good story. That's what he was about, and that's what he is. He's a really good story. And I really hope that I get to tell the end of that story
sometime.
At some point.
Right.
But he was born in 1954, right? So
he's 65 now.
Yeah.
65, yeah. Well, and I was not, of course, at Greg's or your level at all, but there was a time when I dabbled in some independent filmmaking when I lived in Las Vegas, and I wrote some screenplays and things. But that's what writers do. You sit around and think about plots. You think about how things would be set up for things. So, being that he lived that life and worked at it and worked with you, and you were successful at it, it does make sense then that kind of mind would go along with setting something up for disappearance. That's just the way it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very natural thinking. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so and once again, we have to add in that he had no trouble, with this counseling session that he concocted and allegedly going. So when he went to Vegas, so there was certainly things that he was capable of making something look like something else. So okay. Now, it's been 23 years. It's almost exactly 23 years. How long did it take, if I can ask, Sherry, that you finally felt comfortable about, going up on stage again? How long did you take off because of this before you thought, I just got to get back to doing what I do?
Well, I had, in theater you book years in advance or more. So I had a run booked in Montreal in September at the Sadie Bronfman Theater. And so I had to make a living.
Yeah.
So in September, I went to Montreal. My mom came so she could watch the kids. It was 6 weeks. And I remember the theater was having an exhibition in the lobby. And the exhibition was called Death.
Oh, my.
Oh, my God.
Oh, my.
And then all these images of, there was a skyscraper building and the imprint of a bird that had just smack dab into it, or a little baby's hand lying. It was horrifying, Ed.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah.
As I said, I lost my dad at the end of January. I lost my husband in June, and there I was in September, and I was faced with this visual thing, and I lost my breath. I developed a condition called dystonia.
I've heard of it.
And it struggled to get the word.
Yeah.
Like that?
Yeah.
Yeah, that happened.
Yeah.
That happened to me, and the show had to go on nonetheless, and I was in this terrible condition for a long time, and I still did theater, and people would say, great show, but are you okay? Do you have sympathy? What is the matter with you? And it took me years, like 5 years, before I could relax and talk. I could talk, privately, but once I got on the stage, it triggered, and so that was it was really rough. I'm good now.
Right.
I got back on the stage, and I've written 3 other shows, and I perform, and I have been a radio DJ, and I'm well known for public speaking and my comedy. In fact, I just started a run in Berkeley of Oh My Goddess, the play that we were writing at the time that he disappeared. I started a run March 6th, and it had to close for the pandemic, so I was actually back in the legit theater and doing my thing until, that was before Corona.
Yeah. Well, I think
PG, as we
I
say.
do have to say, Sherry, I think you are the first guest that has her own Wikipedia page. So yeah,
Ah,
so that is very impressive. Are you are you and Greg still married on paper, or did you eventually declare him deceased? And what went on there? What is going
yeah.
on there?
Yeah, he was declared dead by a judge. I was a widow,
Okay.
so I'm a widow.
Okay.
Hmm.
What year was that?
I guess that was 2002.
That's about 5 years. 5 years.
Hmm.
And you mentioned that insurance. Did that eventually happen? And that what he was talking about, did you or your children eventually collect on that, or
Yeah,
because?
we did. Got a beautiful insurance policy, bought land in Albion, raised my kids there. Yep.
Okay. All right. Great.
Yep.
Great.
Mhm.
How have your two daughters? How have they been affected? Of course, your one daughter, very young, did not know her father at all. Would never not have any memories. But your daughter, who was 9 at the time, how has she handled this? If you can say.
You know, it was the roughest on her. She was 9, and I think 9 to about 20 was touch and go for her as far as she got very sick. She got into alcohol. She got into bad boys, and she ended up in juvenile hall for a minute. But
Mm-hmm.
that really got to her. Like spending a couple of nights in jail she didn't like that. So then after that, she turned her life around a lot, but she just turned 18, and then she started, doing some farming and, really getting healthy and physical, and she ended up moving to the Middle East, actually,
Really?
where she lives now, and she's happily married to a professor of political science, and she's a nutritionist, and she's beautiful and happy, and
That's
she
fantastic.
still has to. We still deal with it,
Mm-hmm.
but my fear was that my kids wouldn't be able to trust love.
Yeah.
And she's married, and my youngest also is in a relationship, and they're okay.
Great.
I think also because they saw me have to go through so much to heal that, from the abandonment to the losing my breath, and I never gave up. I never just went, oh, I can't. I always came through, and I think that was good for them.
Yeah, they saw your strength, and so they learned to be strong too.
Yeah, they're super strong and
Yeah.
really good people.
Great. Do you have a Facebook page or anything else set up for Greg's disappearance that we can direct the listeners to?
I do have a Facebook page, Sherry Glazer, but it's not about Greg.
Okay.
I have a website. It's www.sherryglazer.net.
Okay, that's fine too.
And I have, my writings on there. I've been published a few times. And I'm in the middle of writing the Greg story, because I wrote my first memoir, Family Secrets, when he was still around. And I think I'm ready for the sequel. So hopefully I'll be publishing that in the near future.
Well, you'll let me know. Yeah, let me know so I can let the listeners know about it, of course. So we can direct them to it, for sure. Any last words before we complete this interview, Sherry?
I think one of the greatest lessons I learned from this whole trauma and life-changing event is the difference between waiting and being patient. And I waited for many, many years for this man, and the waiting hurt me. But being patient, as I've learned to practice, being patient is about being right here and accepting right this minute, and trusting that everything will work itself out in the end. So that's a big difference. That's one of the best.
Interesting.
Lessons.
Okay, interesting. Well, I thank you for joining all of us on this episode of Unfound.
Thank you so much, Ed. It was great to talk to you.
It was great to talk to you too, Sherry. Thank you. And that was my interview with Sherry Glazer, wife of Gregory Howells. I thank her for joining me and all of you on this episode. Please remember that I've done a map and a video for this disappearance. So please go to Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, or theunfoundpodcast.com to check them out. I think they will help you understand Greg's case even better. As I stated during the interview, I was able to track down a Rancho Canada employee who was there the morning that Greg's cart and clubs were discovered on the 13th tee. I should have noted this during the interview, but Rancho Canada actually had 2 courses, not 1. Greg's items were found on the 13th tee of the West course. In addition, Rancho Canada is not open anymore. So here are the notes I took from speaking with that employee. I will not use his name, and these notes are in no particular order. The way he remembers it is that it was, of course, very early morning. Maybe the sun wasn't even up yet. Not unusual. Many golf employees get to the course and start maintaining the grounds well before the sun comes up, because oftentimes golfers are there as soon as the sun does come up. He told me that he was not the first person to find the cart and clubs. Somebody else did, somebody else that was out there on the grounds. That person came and got him, and then they both went back down there to check everything out. The way he remembers it, when he got down there, there were 2 clubs on the ground, and the rest were in the cart. And as I stated before, it was the 13th tee on the West course, and that will be diagrammed in the accompanying map and video for this episode. This person remembered that Greg's blue golf bag was on the cart, even though 2 of the clubs were on the ground. The way he explained it is that it's not like the clubs were on the ground and lined up. I would use the word strewn, even though it was just a couple clubs. They look as if they had just been thrown on the ground. It wasn't like Greg laid them like parallel or perpendicular, anything like that. The clubs were just like somebody just threw 2 of the clubs on the ground. I did ask him if it was unusual for a cart to be left out overnight. In doing this, I did check. I happen to know the golf coach at Largo High School, which is a high school near me here in Florida in the Clearwater area. And actually, this guy is on my pub trivia team. And he, of course, does a lot of golfing. I told him about Gregory's case. He found it to be very unusual that the carts would be left out. And I actually talked to my brother Michael, who has been an avid golfer. I mean, he's in his 60s. He's been golfing for like 40 years. He also found it strange. However, this person who worked at Rancho Canada told me that it was unusual, but it wasn't unheard of. He said that it had happened before where people went home at night and one of the carts was still out on the course somewhere. You should know most golf courses have some sort of system to make sure that all the carts are back in what I guess you would call the clubhouse or the garage. I think most of the time they number them so they can tell, they line them up 1 through whatever, and to see if they're all there and which one is missing. And of course, people are assigned carts by number so they know which player had which cart. Once again, this guy said it was unusual for a cart to be left out overnight somewhere out on the course, but not unheard of. Now, regarding Greg's car still being in the parking lot, when the employees got there the next morning, his car was there. I asked him when somebody left, did it not occur to them, well, there's still this car in the parking lot, could there be something going on? This person told me that was also not unusual because many of the golfers would come to the course in separate cars, and then they'd go out to eat or drink somewhere, and one person would leave the car. They'd go out and then come back, and that person would get in his car and go home. So a car being left in the parking lot when they were leaving at night, whatever time that would be, 8:30, 9 p.m., in addition, was not unusual given the circumstances at the time. This guy said he and another employee checked the vicinity once the cart and the clubs were found. There is a creek that runs right along the boundary there by the 13th tee, right on the edge of the property. They went down in there. There wasn't a lot of water in that creek at that time of the year. There wasn't any mud, so there weren't any footprints to see. They saw no signs that anybody, let alone Greg, but nobody was down in the creek at any time. And I think if you'll remember what Sherry said during the interview is that by the time they had gotten down there, the sprinklers had already started spraying. Maybe the sprinklers work overnight or something, that if Greg did walk off, the sprinklers working, spraying the grass would have covered up any footprints on the golf course fairly quickly. This guy told me that his first thought when getting down there was that, and I should say they quickly determined who it was once they were down there, and maybe there was a name on Greg's bag or something. They quickly determined that it was Greg Howells' equipment and that he was the one who had that cart. But going back to what I said, this person's first idea upon seeing the scene there on the 13th tee was that it was a mountain lion attack. Mountain lions are common in that area, although he could not remember any golfers being attacked. Maybe some golfers had seen one or something, but any golfers being attacked, I couldn't remember that. But he was open to that idea. However, in looking around the area, he thought, and I would agree with him, that if this had been some sort of mountain lion attack, that there would have been blood, things like that. I'm not going to get gruesome here, but there were certainly been signs that a mountain lion had attacked a human there. In fact, what he said was that sometimes when they would get there in the morning, they would see remains of maybe a bird or a rabbit or something, and they could tell that a mountain lion had been on the course during the night and hunted down that particular animal and killed it. That was common, but no mountain lions attacking humans. In looking at Greg's equipment, and this guy was experienced, had been working, I think, in the golf industry for quite a long time. His first impression of Greg's equipment was that Greg was not a serious golfer. Sherry did verify this. I think the way she put it, although not in the interview, but in a prior conversation, he was like a Zen golfer. He wasn't out there trying to get better or anything like that. He was out there just to kind of like be by himself and with his thoughts. And so, being that this particular person said that Greg's equipment did not look like it was owned by a serious golfer, is not a surprise. In talking to this person, I couldn't really tell if he knew that Greg was missing or not. Rancho Canada is not open anymore. This guy is doing something else now, somewhere else. In talking to him, I didn't write this down, but I'm not sure if he realized that Greg was missing 23 years later or not. He remembers the story, but he did say that he never met Greg, doesn't know what he looked like, never met him, anything, even though he did work at this golf club and Greg did golf there. He also said that he never met Sherry and I gave Sherry this particular man's name, and Sherry did not remember meeting him either. This person said that police eventually came and looked around for themselves, and they came to the same conclusion that these employees did, that there was no signs of Greg, no signs that he went in any particular direction, no signs that he was attacked, no signs that other humans showed up on the course and abducted him, no sign of anything. There was just the cart, the bag was in the cart, some of the clubs were in the cart, and a couple of the clubs were on the ground. And once again, this 13th tee on the west course is right on the boundary on this huge property. Remember, it's 2 golf courses, not 1, but 2. And once you take a look at the map and the video that I did, you will see that the 13th tee was about as far from the clubhouse and the parking lot as you could get. So those were the notes that I took in talking with this former employee of Rancho Canada. I want to thank him. We must have talked for about an hour, and I thought he was very forthcoming with me. And like I said, though, in taking those notes during the conversation, I can't remember if I didn't write it down whether he realized that Greg was still missing or not. I got the feeling that I was the first person to talk to him about Greg and the disappearance since 1997. So I appreciate him taking the time to talk to me and probing his memory about something that I'm sure he hasn't thought about in over 20 years. The 2 points that stuck out to me from talking to this former Rancho Canada employee were the cart being left out all night and Greg's car being in the parking lot all night. Granted, it's easy for me to talk. I've never been there, I've never worked at a golf course, and I think we've all taken a shortcut here or there in jobs we've had. And I can even see a situation where either the cart was left out or Greg's car was left there overnight. But both together, it gets me to thinking. Why? Well, I'll tell you. If I'm the employee who is responsible for the golf carts, and I see one is missing at the end of the day, maybe I can rationalize it away, maybe I got a hot date, and I would be thinking, not only do I have to drive all over one course, but I have 2 courses to ride around looking for a cart some idiot golfer left out there. Speaking for myself, I can certainly understand how I would blow that assignment off. But I'd like to think if I then saw an empty car in the parking lot as I was leaving, and I'm the guy who locks the place up, that it might occur to me that a golfer was still out on the course. And maybe I should stick around or at least go find out where he is or she is. It doesn't seem that anyone did that. Why didn't they do that? I don't know. Well, that's not entirely correct. I ran this by Sherry. She was the one who knew Greg's golfing habits. She knew when he'd go out and when he'd come home. She knew how often he went to Rancho Canada. And she came up with the following idea all on her own. Greg could have had an arrangement with someone at the club to be able to golf even after everyone left, then leave the cart outside the building when he was done. It was a revealing moment for me when she said that, because I had come up with the same exact theory on my own. Granted, there is no proof of this. Zero, none, nada. But you can think about it this way. Why would Greg stage his disappearance at the club if he knew that within an hour or whatever, people would come looking for him because he wasn't off the course and hadn't turned in his cart yet? Surely Greg would want more than an hour to get away, because as soon as they'd find the cart but not Greg, the alarm would go out that a golfer was missing. unless he knew for a fact that the club was lax on checking in carts and checking on cars still in the parking lot, which would mean he would have all night to get away instead. I think that makes a lot of sense. Yet, it's just a theory with no proof. There's still the possibility somebody did confront Greg on that tee, and something happened. Most importantly, I am not saying any Rancho Canada employee had something to do with his disappearance. What I'm saying is Greg might have, over the course of a few months, coaxed them into allowing him to do things that weren't normally allowed. Because you have to admit, after hearing that interview, Greg did seem to be able to pull the wool over people's eyes. And even if we think Greg staged his disappearance, we still don't know what that really means. Did he commit suicide, or did he start a new life somewhere else? Meaning, we don't know if he set the stage for his last act or the next one. I'll leave the rest of the theorizing up to you. And that's the program. If you found it informative, please go to the app that you use to listen to Unfound and give this podcast a nice review. I thank you for listening. I'm Ed Densel, and you've been listening to Unfound.